нашего народа. Для нас.
Говори по-русски. Да. Now this guy is definitely up to no good. Just to be clear, I'm Polish, not Russian, but for decades now this particular Eastern European accent or Russian accent has been Hollywood's go-to when it comes to movie bad guys.
Helm, right full rudder to course 270.
Course 270,
We'll just walk away and head for deep water.
But when did it start? Why does it continue? And is there a change to this stereotype on the horizon? Well, spoiler alert, probably not.
And who to blame?
There's an animal stronger than you can imagine.
The United States Army actually pays Hollywood to make the bad guys like certain nationalities.
Are they onto something here? Or are we just wearing tinfoil hats? Well, according to Tane Miles, an associate professor at Ontario Tech University who wrote books on the subject, during and after the Second World War, Hollywood started pumping out movies that supported the war. Now, apparently, the US Office of War Information had a unit dedicated exclusively to Hollywood, the Bureau of Motion Picture. Now, that's definitely not something out of a conspiracy books, because most countries use movies, books, and other mediums for propaganda, especially during wartime. Why We Fight by a filmmaker Frank Capra were a series of 7 American propaganda films during the Second World War, shaping the military narrative, clearly making out the good and the bad guys.
When we saw these men in the newsreels, quite often we laughed. To us, they looked like characters in a musical comedy.
Now, after the war, the mood carried on with movies like John Wayne's The Green Berets, made during the Vietnam War in 1968. And it was an anti-communist, pro-military film made in cooperation with the Department of Defense.
Let's move out. Move out.
And you know, it's not like Hollywood stopped using movies for military messages now. After Top Gun came out in 1986, many people said it led to a surge in sign-up to the US military, known as the Top Gun effect. Now, it's somewhat debunked now, though, but I digress. Let's get back to the Russians. After the Second World War, America found another threat to their way of life, the atheist, centrally governed communist system. Now, this idea of constant fear and threat to national security was supported with movies and even animated ones like 1954 Animal Farm, partly funded by the CIA. And apparently the British filmmakers Halas and Bachelot didn't know they were working with the CIA, who changed the ending so the pigs, who represented communism, were overthrown, like in the end. Which is not how the novel ends. Cause all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. The USSR, or the Soviet Union, was seen as the America's main adversary during the Cold War. And movies like 2015 A Breed of Spies show that dynamic between the two countries. And I actually worked on dubbing on that film, and it's really good. It's actually really good.
Something important has come up. We've got a Soviet spy.
But okay, I know I focus on American view of the conflict in this video, but of course there were many movies from the British side too. Like 2011 Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy is a great example.
For 25 years, we've been the only thing standing between Moscow and the Third World War.
So I guess we can safely assume that it was then that the evil Russian stereotype started, and then, broadly speaking, a scary Eastern European. Hollywood created the perfect villain, and it wasn't punching down. The Soviet Union was seen as powerful and It scared the Americans, especially with its threat of nuclear war. So we got the spies, the oligarchs, the rulers of the corrupt regime fighting with the Western heroes protecting democracy. Red Scare, a moral panic provoked by far-left ideologies like communism, has begun. And just look at the list of movies that fueled the panic. It's only a selected filmography. And, that's fine. The USSR was a powerful opponent, and using them as villains in movies was justified. But in December 1991, 2 years after the Berlin Wall fell, the Soviet Union collapsed. The threat of global communism was no more. But using Eastern Europeans, particularly Russians, as bad guys didn't end, and the stereotype persisted. Now, why is that? I guess one explanation is that after the Union fell, there was a chaos, and each country scrambled to reorganize its economies, some with better results than others, and it led to corruption, kleptocracy, mafia, and organized crime, and it was blatant. Everyone could see what was going on. So now, instead of Cold War spies and government boots, we have a Russian mobster, a criminal, a gangster, a conman, a villain.
John, I didn't go on now.
And the Red Scare shifted. It wasn't about the threat of communism anymore, but the remnants of it. The lessons of what happens when societies choose to go this way, the wrong way. And this continues in Hollywood to this day. Former socialist states are often portrayed negatively in a grey color scheme, old cars, babushkas on the streets, distorting history and, not so sadly, emphasizing the superiority of the Western way of life. I was born in 1987 and grew up in post-communist Poland. It wasn't perfect, but it was also far from a post-apocalyptic wasteland as some movies portray. But the labels stuck. The West are the good guys, and the East, the bad guys.
Come on! That's all you've got! Come on, throw another one!
It doesn't look like punching down, even though filmmakers get away with essentially villainizing entire countries and entire communities.
We're in Eastern Europe.
But Eastern Europeans kind of fly under the radar when it comes to the culture war debate. We don't really fit in any of the arguments, which is a topic for another video and probably for someone else who cares about that. So we know why. But let's now talk about how the evil Russian bad guys are often portrayed on our screens. Now, they're not a friendly bunch. They lack a sense of humor and never smile. Only an idiot smiles at strangers.
Let's try this again. Yes? Who do you work for?
And there's even a saying, loosely translated from Polish, "Why are you smiling like an idiot looking at cheese?" So randomly smiling at others is a sin. The next one is, it's always cold, it's always winter in Russia, which hardens people, makes them tough. They also have a distrust of law, and everyone has mafia connections.
It's not what you did, son, that angers me so. It's who you did it to.
Who? The fucking nobody?
Bears are like pets and freely roam the streets of the post-communist Russia. And all of it plays into the tough villain portrayal. Vladimir Putin, an actual Russian leader, is riding a horse topless. So it's an excellent example, and it plays into the stereotype of a hardened Slavs.
When you were in, you were like family. Treat you like you were one of his own. Then out of the blue comes this 6'6" geezer from Russia. Whispers that he was exiled from the Russian mafia, that he was ex-KGB.
And then we, of course, have a language which can sound scary in its own way.
Какого черта он вообще делал в автобусе?
Если нянчил, думаешь, это как-то связано с общаком?
Да все так или иначе связано с общаком. Сколько нам еще с ним нянчиться?
But of course, it's just a language, and decades of portrayals in the media contributed to the perception of the Russian Slavic as intimidating, menacing, and imposing, all remnants of the Soviet era. Now, some try to change this trend with a Russian politician saying in 2014 that Hollywood portrayals are damaging to their country. There had been attempts to rise above this trope. Arnold Schwarzenegger played a Soviet policeman in 1988 Red Heat.
Пошли. Все вместе.
Or the more recent Black Widow, or Natasha Romanoff, played by Scarlett Johansson as one of Marvel's Avengers. Her past as a Russian agent was explored in 2021 Black Widow movie, and she transformed into a protector in America.
Вы правда думаете, что я красива?
And another one, Dr. Sergei Orestevich Nikolov, played by Polish actor Piotr Adamczyk in the sci-fi series For All Mankind. He's a Soviet engineer on the Apollo-Soyuz team.
Сергей Рестовичников, очень приятно. Сергей Рестовичников.
Margot Madison.
So, there have been attempts. But even if we get these singular friendly Russians, they're often persecuted by the regime, the evil government that punishes its people, the outliers, the outcasts. They're not the norm. Will this stereotype change anytime soon? Well, probably not.
Cops are coming.
Leave it to Mother Russia. She makes 10 times what we do.
50,000 a week plus expenses.
Add to that the visibility of Russian gangsters and oligarchs who made global cities like New York or London their residence, and the scary traits, the menacing aura, the accents, the tattoos, the hair, the cars. It's a fearsome image on the screens, easy to exploit.
Yevgeny Chivchvarkin was only meant to come to London for 10 days. He's been here for 5 years now and has even set up shop.
And how much is that one?
98,000.
Because people are used to scary, iconic characters like Ivan Drago from Rocky or Igor Korushnov from Air Force One. They're formidable and scary, but ultimately defeated by American heroes. The narrative still stands to this day. But ultimately, yes, stereotypes have a grain of truth in them. At least that's how they start. But when they are repeated and turned into tropes, then often shape the image of other cultures for millions of people. So we've got to be careful with it. And as far as I'm concerned, it's up to us to break these conventions. Zdrowie.